Welcome back to another exciting episode of We Heart Therapy. You're tuning in to Your Guide to Therapy and Coaching series. I'm your host, Anabelle Bugatti, and today we're talking to couples who are interested in getting couples therapy. And of course, there are different types of therapy available for couples. And one such approach that we're going to be talking about today is integrative couples counseling. And I have special guests with me today. I have Dr. Jared DeFife, and he's from Atlanta. And he's going to talk to us today about an integrative approach to couples therapy. Thank you so much, Dr. Fife, for being here.
Hi, Anabelle. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, Dr. DeFife, if you could tell us a little bit more about what integrative couples therapy is exactly.
Sure. Well, integrative couples therapy is really similar to what most all couples therapy try to do. It's really about trying to turn conflicts into greater amounts of connection in couples who are struggling with some core differences. In an integrative couples therapy approach, we work under the assumption that couples, just because of their unique histories, bring kind of unique core differences to a marriage. She's a spender, he's a saver. One partner wants to feel closer and more connected and is comfortable with the high degree of closeness. The other one feels like they like their free space and time apart. And what you find over the course of a long relationship, a partnership, or a marriage is that sometimes these core differences can trip off some emotional vulnerabilities. These core differences can come under times of external stressors, job stressors, life stressors, having a child, family stressors. And that when those differences meet some emotional vulnerabilities and external stressors, they start to engage patterns of communication that leave couples feeling either strangers from each other, that they've become really distant, cold, not speaking very much. The conflicts just sort of erode and the connection erodes over time, or that they become enemies of each other, that they are constantly fighting and kind of bickering and arguing, and that erodes the closeness in the relationship. So integrative couples therapy is about finding ways to look at those conflicts and change those conflicts into greater amounts of connection for a couple.
And what types of strategies specifically does integrative couples therapy use in their sessions?
Great question. The integrative part of integrative couples therapy is that it draws on a number of different traditions. But the main thing that makes integrative couples therapy different from some others is that, over time, some researchers looked at how do couples change in counseling over time. And they found that, especially in couples that are highly distressed or have higher conflicts, that just kind of teaching straight up behavioral strategies and skills or communication skills, or saying, if you take out the trash on Tuesday, I'll be nicer to you on Wednesday. And these kind of contracted exchanges weren't really effective for couples, or if they were effective, they lasted for a very brief time and couples fell back into their old patterns. So what integrative couples therapy does is it focuses a lot on greater acceptance, or what I call resilience, in the couples. And we do this by trying to do some things with the couples around empathic joining around these differences and problems, being able to, getting each partner to express vulnerability and have it received by the other, and building a platform to look at their differences and the conflicts that sort of sets the problem not between you and me, but outside of themselves. And also with the realization that not all conflicts can be cause for getting closer. And sometimes you have to accept your partner for who they are. That oftentimes these core differences are the very things that attracted people in the first place. Say, one partner says, I used to like your sense of adventure. And that was great, and that's what drew me to you in the first place. But over time, I've become more comfortable and wanted things to be quieter on a Saturday night. And I don't want to go out with all our friends every weekend. But you've changed, and now you're kind of demanding a partner to change. So it's about increasing acceptance and resilience for the kind of problems that couples face together.
That's really excellent. So what it sounds like is that integrative couples therapy uses a variety of approaches from perhaps different therapy models and strategies in order to create emotional safety, help create a place of vulnerability, and increase acceptance so that the differences don't no longer feel like a threat in the relationship.
That's right. I like to think of it as a little bit of mix of like insight-oriented approaches where the couple is looking together and getting insight into the pattern of the problem and the origins of their problem. It's a good mix of what people might be familiar as emotion-focused approaches that are based on empathy, compassion, vulnerability, and a good sousant of Gottman type therapy or behavioral type approaches that do teach some communication skills when a couple's in a collaborative set to do so. I think integrative therapy kind of mixes kind of the best of each of those worlds.
And I love that you said the words emotionally focused because I'm an emotionally focused therapist. So I know that strategy and I know that works very effectively. So it
Mhm.
sounds like this would be great for couples, especially you said you specialize in high conflict couples. And so this type of therapy could be especially effective for couples in that situation.
Absolutely. And when researchers were first testing integrative couples counseling, in the sort of research setting. That was one thing they specifically looked at in some of the trials that they were doing. They really wanted to screen out sort of conflict couples who were minimally distressed. They really wanted to get the most distressed couples, conflicts that had been pretty severe and lasting for a significant amount of time, and found that this approach was really helpful for that. And I found that in my practice, when couples come in with a high degree of conflicts, whether that conflict is really loud or hot conflict, they're constantly fighting with each other, or really cold and distant, I think it's a great approach.
Yeah, yeah. And usually couples will recognize that something major is happening in this relationship and we can't continue down this path anymore.
Yeah, and it takes couples so long often to pick up the phone to call in to seek out marriage help. Unfortunately, we wish they would sooner,
Right.
but a lot of times it does take a lot of courage and time and a lot of sometimes pain to get to a point where you're saying this really needs to change and we need to get help. So oftentimes couples are calling in with a high degree of distress anyway.
Right. So our couples might be sitting here watching this video and wondering, well, is this type of therapy, would it be good for our relationship problems, or are there certain relationship problems maybe that this approach is not good for, or do you think anything?
Absolutely a great question. And I think there are a couple scenarios where, with any therapy model, it's going to have limitations. There are a couple of scenarios where integrative couples counseling might not be the best. And I think some of it hold for similar across most couples and marital therapies. One is if both members of the couple aren't terribly committed to actually trying to work on their problems, um, couples counseling in general might not be the best fit. If
No.
one feels like they're half out of the marriage or trying to decide about whether to stay or go, there are other models and approaches for that. One called discernment counseling kind of comes to mind. So if one partner is really like, this is it. I really don't want couples counseling. I don't feel that the problems here are worth fixing. That's obviously going to be a sign that probably isn't going to be a great fit. There are some other situations in scenarios, sort of special cases that integrative approach, the integrative couples counseling concepts may be helpful, but there might be special scenarios. If there is a recently discovered affair, there's some special considerations going on about having to address the affair particularly. If there is domestic violence going on in the couple, you need to talk about safety issues and considerations, and also really active addictions as well. And some of these are the kind of contraindications or special circumstances that you would find with most any couples therapy.
Yes, I agree with you there. And even as an emotionally focused therapist, same thing, active addiction, affair, most of the things that you mentioned, domestic violence, of course. So, and I don't think a lot of couples realize that there's certain circumstances which can sort of detract from or keep them from being able to move forward, usually because these circumstances make it difficult for us to provide safety for us to work through, like emotional safety for us to work through the issues with the couple. And of course, if they're ambivalent about the relationship, it doesn't matter what approach to therapy you have, is probably not good.
Right, right. And if they're really ambivalent about wanting to work on it at all, you would need a type of treatment to work on that ambivalence, where the partners aren't necessarily working together on the same agenda.
Right.
One's contemplating leaving, and one's wanting to try and make it work. So that calls for a different kind of scenario.
So how can our viewers find a therapist who uses an integrative approach in their area? What might they search for?
Oh, so that's a great question. To my knowledge, there's no sort of set database that you can go to. It doesn't have sort of the same kind of level of a certification track similar to a Gottman or Emotionally Focused, where you might go to the national site to find a list of people. So you would want to ask around and talk with a couples therapist in your area. The other thing about an integrative couples approach is it says that, a lot of what we know is that what works in the type of model of therapy matters to a degree less than who the therapist is. That you have a good relationship with them, that you agree on what you're working on, that you guys can set some goals together. So the best thing that you can do is reach out to some folks, get a great referral, talk to some counselors over the phone to see about what their approach is and if they might be a good fit. You can give them a call and talk for a little bit before even coming in. Check, and most people find me through the web. Do Google searches for their area, Psychology Today listings, goodtherapy.org listings, to find some qualified couples counselors in your area.
And could they specifically Google integrative couples therapist?
Yeah, probably. They can do integrative couples therapist. They can do integrative, or another term that's been used is integrative behavioral couples therapy, or IBCT. Another thing that they can look for is the book Reconcilable Differences on Amazon. It was written by some of the founders of this approach that kind of is a little bit of a self-help guide. That can also, there's some information there about how to find a good qualified couples counselor as well.
Excellent. So some excellent resources that you mentioned. Of course, Google is always our best friend and can lead us to many of those websites that you mentioned, like Psychology Today. And so if folks are in the Atlanta area and they'd like to work with you, how can they find you?
Best place is through the website, which is dccatlanta.com.
All right, excellent. And we're definitely going to put a link in the drop-down box. So if you're in the Atlanta area and you're a couple searching for counseling, please look up Dr. DeFife. And of course, if you're in Las Vegas, you can find me. And as always, Google in any other area. Thank you so much for being with us again today, Dr. DeFife. Thank you to our viewers for watching another episode of We Heart Therapy. And as always, more episodes are on the way.
Thank you.